vTalk, a podcast by vTech Solution.
Today's conversation is going to be around the federal digital revolution and elevating the customer experience. Today, we are honored to have both Maria Rote and Chris Smith with us on the panel today. Maria is a senior information technology executive, and cybersecurity executive with over 3 decades of experience driving enterprise scale efforts of digital transformation across the federal government. Chris joins us as well, also a senior technology executive. He is a leader who drives business growth, leads complex service delivery efforts, and implements cutting-edge technology innovations, again, across the federal government. Thank you, Maria and Chris, for being with us here today.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Yeah, good to see you all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. With that said, typically we do a poll, folks, to our audience members. We don't have a poll today. So we're going to jump right into the questions. I just ask those that are joining us online or in YouTube, just hold your questions for the end, and then we'll get them answered by Maria and Chris at the very end of the presentation. Okay, with that said, I'm going to start off with question number one. And question number one, we'll start with Maria, if that's okay with you. And that question is, to the level set the topic of discussion for today, what does the customer experience in the digital space mean to you, Maria? And what constitutes a positive customer experience?
Yeah, we talk about customer experience, digital space, anything dealing with digital and customer experience, it absolutely has to be easy to access, right? Very easy to access how you get to something. And it needs to be pretty intuitive design. I mean, how many times have you been on a website or filling out an e-form and you scratch your head going, wait, this makes absolutely no sense, or too many clicks or too many things like that. And it really has to be, really transparent about what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve as you have this interaction, whatever that interaction is, filling out a form, asking a question. It needs to be very intuitive. And I think that creates very much a positive experience.
Absolutely. Chris, you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in because we're at the beginning of the session. Maria, it's great to be with you and Mike and everybody who dialed in on this fine Friday. If you're on the East Coast, it's like summer. We just skipped springtime, and it's 5 degrees out here at my farm in Shenandoah Valley. They announced 73. I was sweating running around outside, but good to be with you all. We throw around terms like CX and DX because we're in the IT space, and I think everybody knows what it means, but simply said, it's what Maria was talking about. It's right. How is the engagement with whoever your customer might be, or if you're the customer coming in, on digital platforms, right? And so the DX is the digital experience. You can certainly call on a telephone. Still today, you can walk into a brick and mortar, facility, whether it's applying for SSA benefits, IRS. If you want to go into an office, they're still in almost every county in the country, or about 1,000 of them each across the country. But this is right about the digital experience and what does that really mean to people? And let's be honest, I mean, everybody now it's a digital native. Even if you're in late stages of your life, you've had some experience with computers at this point. There is nobody. We used to worry about that back in the day. As things were being designed, did we have to worry about a certain part of the population? We still have people that need, enhancements made to systems for whatever their needs may be to be able to have a fluid interaction. But this is really about how does the government, right, expose their services or their information in a meaningful way that's really, as you said, Maria, in my mind, easy to do. Right. And the reality is, though, someone may be coming in, younger generations are likely going to be on a handheld with a very small screen. Folks up a generation or two, but not coming to the end of their lives, right, are probably going to still be on larger tablets and PCs and laptops. And so, a few years ago, we used to have to design to each one of those kind of in its own way, and we couldn't cover every one of them in a good way. So I think, what people expect today, just to set the stage, and I took a long time to get here, is that people expect that wherever they are, you're going to meet them, right? Whether it's a
Yeah.
handheld device, a tablet, or a heavy PC, still to this day. So I'm always amazed at how broad the interactions can be in the commercial sector or in government, right? I mean, you can have a really seamless, great interaction. Like I'll name one out there. I don't know stocking them, but Fidelity is one that I found has a really intuitive user interface, whereas another bank that I have, in a local area, just is not quite where Fidelity is. But that's probably because of the size and scope and scale of them. But setting the stage, I think there's still a wide array of digital services out there. Some of them are really good, some of them are okay, and some of them are not the best. Right?
Yeah.
That's the world we're living in. Sorry,
Yeah.
go back to you.
Yeah, I think you make a great point though, Chris, about, the accessibility. And I think about, my mom, she falls into the older population. And I know, on her phone and elsewhere, I've had to set up like high contrast, right? So she
Yeah.
can see, and those accessibility features are critical for somebody like her being able to, expand the fonts, making sure she knows how to do that. And then making sure that whatever the interface is from a is responsive to her so that it is high contrast so she can see it.
Yeah, I agree. I got a lot of gray hair, but I'm really young yet. And my reading is terrible. So yeah, finding that, the top text, the big A,
Yeah.
on the device. But you'll find that, to your point, it's a great example. There's a wonderful app for the pilots that I use, and I'm not going to name the name, but that doesn't carry over into that app, and that's the case in many, right? And that's one of those apps that you're using constantly with a lot of maps and everything else. And so, yeah, you're hitting on a good point there. Is you got to be able to operate across the spectrum of devices, and again, I like to say meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Thank you both. Okay, this next question, I'm going to start with you, Chris. The next question is, if done correctly, what role does having a positive customer experience play in the relationship to federal services?
Yeah, I mean it's the end all to be all, because depending on what interaction a individual is having with the government, and people don't have, if you really look at it, most people do not have a lot of interactions with the federal government. It's at key points in their lifetime. You're not having a digital experience yet as a baby when you get that social security card, right? But that's one of the first things that you interact with people in, is to get that. And then at the end of your life, right, then you apply for those benefits. You may have, survivors benefits in between if you have a health issue or your parents pass away. There are programs in between, but that's a great example of, you're going to have probably pretty limited interaction with the Social Security Administration, but it's like really important. So it's really important, and that's positive. And they're one of those agencies that has really gotten it over time, right? I lost my Social Security card, and for some reason, somebody wanted to see it a couple of years ago. And wow, was it easy to go in and get it, but with a lot of security around it. So they weren't giving it away. So that interaction is critically important, because it may truly be the only interaction that citizen has with that agency at a given time, right? Lord forbid you're in a disaster, right? You're going to interact with a lot of different agencies when that happens. And I'm going to use a not-for-profit first, like the Red Cross is just known for their customer care. I mean, if you, Lord forbid, your house burns down or anything. I used to work in retail a long, long time ago, and people lose their clothes, the shelter, right? It's Maslow's hierarchy. It's clothing, shelter, and security. And people within hours would be walking in with vouchers to those retail stores to get clothes, to clothe themselves, right? And to get out. And the Red Cross has done a great job of keeping up with that digital experience now. And you could extend that to FEMA, and other agencies that you could interact with during an emergency. So making that positive when somebody's really in a critical life, emergency is important. And I'll be quiet here. I'm just going to say another one is like the IRS we interact with every year, right? And now I think the numbers are 90% self-serve on household taxes. Like 240 million Americans do their taxes once a year in April, right? And that's now like 90%, and it's pretty darn seamless and easy, right? It goes in either through your tax provider or your tax software, or you can submit it. And, they do all the matching behind the scenes. And, if everything goes well, you don't interact with them. Now, when you do have to interact, it gets a little, IRS does really good at this stuff, but sometimes you just get a form in the mail. So you come out of the digital world and you're not sure because all the scams that are going on out there. Is that really a letter? And that's where it gets a little interesting, where I'd say there may be opportunity, for that organization as they go forward. But so that positive experience, I'm just going to end up on never forgetting. I spent, most of my career in the federal government as Maria did, and Mike, you've spent time serving them, and I've served them in industry. I think one of the most important things to never forget is that the true, payer of one's salary is the taxpayer. So yes. To the positivity of the interaction, whether it's digital, in person, or over the phone, needs to be as stellar as we can make it, because we're really using, everybody's money to get this done. And so, and our public servants do awesome with this, but that is where I would end my comments on positivity. It sure as heck better be a good interaction, because, we're all paying into this, everything that we get out of that, all the infrastructure, the services, and all that type of thing. So.
Yeah, I think if I can add on, Chris, I think you make some really great points, and that, with both of us serving so long in the federal government, we know our way around all the agencies and all of that. But when you step outside the Beltway and step outside of other very populated federal centers across the nation, people see the federal government as one entity. You might have the IRS, but people see the government as one big entity, and that positive experience, it doesn't matter which agency somebody touches. Yeah, I had a great experience with the federal government, or maybe not. But I think when we think about federal services, taking the perspective of that customer, that they see it as, oh, the federal government, right? And look at it holistically, not just agency by agency.
That's a great point, Maria. Absolutely. No, great point. All right. Wonderful. Thank you guys both for those answers. Next question, I'm going to start with you, Maria. If you were to give the federal government a scorecard on digital modernization, what would you give it and why?
This is a great question, Mike. And
we are recording you, Mrs. Roach.
Yes.
And well, let me start this way. So I am, coming out of the federal government, you guys know I'm a huge champion for the federal government, right? The big cheerleader, right? And there's tons and tons of goodness just across the board in digital modernization, just across the whole federal government, but on the flip side, the press highlights when something goes wrong, or, well, that 40-year-old mainframe still exists, right? And that's what gets attention. And I think some of the goodness does not get enough press. Or when somebody has a positive experience, that doesn't get enough positive, you guys know as well as I do, right? If you have had bad experience, how many people are you going to tell? At least 7.
Right.
And I was hard pressed to give the federal government a score, because could I say C or a B? It's not an A, but is it somewhere in the middle? And oftentimes it's not the technology that are the blockers either. It's some of the bureaucratic things that get in the way of that digital modernization, right? It's the people and the processes, not necessarily the technology. And
Right.
when you look at the CX executive order, right, for one, that came out nearly 2 years ago,
Yep.
and then most recently, OMB published the agency priority goal updates, right? So it highlighted where agencies like USDA, for example, they use customer feedback to simplify loan processes and provide online access to different benefits and things like that. So you're seeing the goodness that I mentioned at the top of the question across the federal government, but that doesn't get nowhere near the visibility that it should.
Right.
Especially across all the other agencies, there's a lot of modernization, a lot of things that are happening that are definitely public facing, that are being changed. Again, the goodness doesn't get a lot of attention. A lot of times the bad, it's about, well, it was a bad experience that gets all the press. So I'm hard pressed to give it a score, but I think I told you why.
No, wonderful answer. Chris, any thoughts there, sir? Oh, you got the mute button going.
Sorry, technical difficulties for me. I think my other speaker just went off, so hopefully you guys can hear me now.
Yep.
Yeah, I was right where Maria was. It's hard to give a grade. The federal government is very big, but I'm in the same range. I think it's a B minus C plus, because there's always something to do, and some agencies are at an A plus, and some are probably down at a D, right? I mean, it's just how it is, and that you could say that commercially too. I used a couple examples of banking and financial tool sets that I have at my disposal. One is a smaller regional bank, and the other is a big behemoth, and the behemoth is doing really well, and the regional bank leaves a little bit to be desired in my estimation, right? And I think that's true, and that's even true down within agencies. So, I like overall it's very good. I mean, there's a lot of effort that has been put into this, but we always have to continue to go forward from my perspective. And again, there are examples that we could cite where and we probably will here in the next few minutes, right, where it's frictionless and really easy, and other places where you're hunting and pecking. One of my pet peeves is that the in my business, being in the the business of government, if you will, and very connected to it, and having been in government, is the amount of information about the agencies that's easily found is not consistent across the federal government. Now, there was an attempt, USA Gov, which is a really good site, and I didn't get a chance to pull the statistics on it, but that was a broad attempt to take and try and give an umbrella over the 24 CFO Act agencies, and the 100 or so other kind of boards and commissions and independent agencies that are out there. So, but always room to move forward, but definitely not not laggards across the board for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Okay, the next question, Maria, I'm going to start with you again. What are the pain points or issues surrounding the customer experience within the federal government, and how do we change the dynamic there?
Yeah, I think I actually have a little story for you. Something personal experience I'm right in the middle of right now. Middle of the year last year, I was supposed to get a check from an agency. Didn't happen. They sent me a thing in the mail that said, "Okay, your check, something something was mailed." Never got it. Okay, what happened? Called the agency, long story short, oh, looks like, a stolen check or something like that, right? Great, we're going to pass this on to another bureau. When you are bureau component of this particular agency, they passed it on, and we got some paperwork in the mail, and we filled it out and mailed it in, and then crickets. Crickets. Called the phone number that's online. Oh, you'll love this. On the phone number, you go through the little options. It says your call is important to us. Please call back. Click.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. And then if you fill out the online form, for an inquiry, because I will back up a little bit, the forms that we mailed in, we put a tracker on it through the post office, so we know it was delivered to the PO box. So the follow-up is the phone calls, and then the web forms. You fill out the web form, all the information on it, crickets. After about 4 months, you start going, well, according to the data on their website, we should be hearing a response from them in about 6 weeks. And now we're coming up on 3-4 months and something's happening. I will tell you that the person that's in charge of this particular bureau component, I worked with some years ago, and I know him personally, and I picked up the phone and called him. And I said, help. Now, this is not something that Joe Citizen can do.
Right.
But that's what it took for me. And he said, what do you mean the phone number's hanging up? I said, yep. He said, oh, no, that's not supposed to be like that. And I said, well, it's your agency.
Yes. Right.
I mean, long story short, he put me right in touch with the right people, and things are moving now. But it took that to really, and that's a pain point, right? So if somebody's calling a phone number and they're getting, yeah, your call's important to us, click. And then you're filling out the web form and you're getting no response. What do you do? Right?
Yeah.
You're totally at a loss. You have no way to reach that agency other than, if it wasn't for me picking up the phone and calling my friend who's the head of that agency, I would have just been doing what? Resubmitting my form again and sending it to the circular file. So, that's a prime example of just a pain point that people experience, and that's hard. And in the to address that and to improve that, a couple recommendations, right? There's technology around this. Don't hang up the phone, put it in a queue. This
Right.
is easy. The things to address it are very, very easy, right? Using technology to put the phone in the queue, put a number in there, leave your number, get a call back, all of that. And then for web forms and inquiries, right? I did this at the SBA where we had during the pandemic tons of phone calls, tons of inquiries from small businesses, all wanting to know the status of their money, whether it was the idle grants, a paycheck. We put a system in place that was able to pull all that in, used AI, consolidated. It was all from the same caller, duplicative emails, all of that stuff. We were able to very quickly consolidate thousands and thousands of emails and phone calls into one for a one customer, right? One to many, and be able to respond to it. So there's some things that can be done that are low hanging fruit that are very easy. So addressing those pain points and then looking at how to improve that customer experience. My recommendation is go after the low hanging fruit first.
Right. Well said. Mr. Smith, anything you'd like to add there, sir?
No, I think that was a great example that Maria had,
Yes.
how
Yes.
frustrating that is. And to add to a frustrating point is anyone who has a digital, kind of interchange or website exchange with a customer, but then says you got to mail in the form. Right. It's like, now take that form, go change your policy on the back end that allows for a digital signature. Right. There's still a lot of that, unfortunately, across the board. I got to have this for my audit records. Well, that's fine. But find out the way to automate that, break down the silos and the red tape, and go change it for your customer. Because in this day and age, right, when you have to fill something out online and then go and fill it out and mail it in, or the only way to get it in is to mail it in. I'm not going to name names, but there's a registration process in the federal government for certain types of conveyance, and it's still pretty much paper based, and it takes months, and they always ask a question. So it generally takes about a year to register something, and it's just completely untenable. Right.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of reasons from a safety and a regulatory standpoint, but in today's age, you can find ways to accept digital signatures and not have the paper. Right.
Yeah,
Print it out on
exactly.
your end. If you want to print it out on your end and put it in a folder in somebody's desk, but that's really old school too at this stage of the game. So
Yeah,
with
just having
blockchain and
an
everything else, you can do it.
Yep. It's just having an assigned case number and being able to go in and look at the status. I mean, I'm on 2 years into something and I'm having to call all the time. Okay, what's the status? What's the status? Well, if I had a case number and I was able to just log in and go look at it, I would know where it is. Those are very simple things.
Yes. Well
Back to the
said.
positive interaction.
Well said. No, you both bring up great points, and the citizen population is out there dealing with the commercial world, the majority of the time, and everything is speed to market, right? So, the federal government's got some work to catch up there. Okay, great. So, Chris, I'm going to start with you on this one. If a government organization wants to improve their digital customer experience, what are the essential matrices or other factors they should take into consideration to deliver a better customer experience?
Well, take a step back initially, right? If you're looking at how to modernize, improve your digital, the digital experience and the customer experience through your platforms, it's really important to take a step back and put yourself, and Maria said this earlier, in your customer shoes. I mean,
Yes.
and start with the outcome up front, right? Well, what is the result, the outcome, and how's it going to be viewed from the customer's perspective, right? That should really drive you through the whole product. To this day, and I'm not going to, hit the government on this any more than I'd hit the commercial sector, people still don't get that right. So, it's critically important that you do this strategically before you get tactical, right? But then the metrics are easy, right? And it's making sure you got feedback kind of mechanisms in an automated manner at each point, right? It's starting with that high touch again up front with the customer focus groups, and putting them in the driver's seat, using agile methods to kind of iterate and test things as you're going forward. But the biggest metric you're going to get, if you can get people to give it to you, is customer satisfaction, right? How was my interaction? You can make that easy. Hey, 1 star coming out, and if you less than 1 star, please give us some comments on where we can improve. There are things like the customer effort score, that you can figure out how many clicks did somebody have to go through, how many starts and stops did they have, were they kicked out, that type of thing. And then just your digital kind of KPIs to begin with, right? Do you get, a high level of direct traffic? How much indirect traffic are you getting if you're using other channels to get your people to where you are? What's the dwell time on your site? How many times they click through? So there's a million metrics out there,
Yes.
picking the top ones. But really, it's about the customer's interaction and how they're good. And I would also say making sure you're multi-channel. If at this stage of the game, you're kind of, one way in and one way out on the digital, and I'm not even talking getting to the phone, right? Make sure you got, some chat and it's manned, or there's a way for somebody to reach back out that they can get to you. And then if they do want to use phone, you've got, your systems interacting. Maria talked, about that, and that's critically important, right? And
Yes.
don't rest on your laurels to the point where Maria calls up and, the person she calls the agency because she knew somebody. Well, that's supposed to be working. Sometimes you need that call, right? But getting on it quickly, stuff does go bad. But you can use automated calling, bots and screen crawlers and all sorts of stuff out there to make sure that what you're doing, and try it yourself. That is one of the most interesting things. A lot of times people don't, beyond the team that made it.
Right.
People don't go in and just say, "Hey, I'm a mystery shopper," if you will, right, in the retail store and rolling through. So those are the big things I think that I had. I'm just looking if I made a couple notes on this point, but no, I think that's it from my perspective.
That's
Thank
funny,
you.
Chris. I used to call my help desk. My staff, they hated it, but I would call my help desk
Yeah.
and open my own tickets by myself to see how the experience went. I used to do that.
Yeah, that's critically important, and a lot of people don't take that extra effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well done. Well done. Well said. Okay. Next question. Chris, I'm going to start with you on this one as well. How can a U.S. federal government organization assess if they need an upgraded customer experience within their agency?
Somebody from the outside, right, come and take a look at it. You can have, somebody from another agency that you're working with, another IT shop. You could have just program people. Again, if people are not kind of consuming their own meal there, if you will, or eating their own dog food, or drinking their own champagne, that people like to say. But if you've got a little bit, one of the greatest strengths of our country is industry and government working together. And an agency's first role is not to be the best DX, CX people on the planet, right? They got a lot of things that they do in their missions. Yes, they should be very good at it. Yes, there's a role in certain organizations, either within the kind of public relations side of the house or the IT shops or other programs that they have to have a customer facing aspect of what they do. But a lot of times having the right group in with you that already has the tools, the templates, the tests, and you probably already have them on contract. Honestly, they may be doing something slightly different, but I think accessing people who are experts that do this day in and day out, and you'll hear me say it wasn't just DX from an IT standpoint, it's really marketing. I mean, to be honest, I know we're talking more about transactions and interactions, but it's marketing around that helps people have a good flow through it, right? And you know, you may not need marketing, but in many cases, I found in the organizations that I was in, Department of Agriculture, for example, we really worked with our communications office hand in glove on any customer facing aspect of what we did. You know, even if it was a form for a farm loan, right? Making sure that all parts of the organization kind of had a view into it. Because in big agencies, there's kind of different mission drivers, and I don't want to say competition, that's not the right term, but making sure those are all in sync and that, you know, hey, over here, we're trying to do X, Y, and Z. Down here, we're trying to do this. I'm trying to fill a need here. If those things come together nicely, any interaction that a person has within that big organization will be that much more smooth and that much more positive. And then running tests, I'll stop there, but constantly testing and poking at your infrastructure, from the outside in and the inside out, right, is just good practice, and not just for the customer, for security reasons, for efficiency, for effectiveness, and probably 5 other reasons.
Maria, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so first one, how do you assess if you need upgraded customer experience? I'll tell you what, people will post online all day long. And so that is a feedback channel, and comms ought to be paying attention to that, right? As well. But I'll tell you on the assessment piece, I know if you look at like performance.gov, right, when the CX executive order came out, and you look government wide, those initiatives that were taken on, they all start with customer feedback. Chris talked about this. What is that customer feedback, and what is that loop? It's not just a one way. What is the feedback loop? So it's a dialogue with the customer to make sure that they're satisfied. And then, also looking not just agency by agency, but across the federal government, where there are intersections where information is passed from one agency to next, right? Disaster assistance, right? That's one that everybody understands. Chris, you mentioned that earlier, right? So FEMA working with SBA and HUD. If you go to FEMA and you apply for a grant, you don't get a grant, but then you get sent over to SBA for a loan potentially, because you can get a loan for your house at a good interest rate. So there's a lot of interaction there. And then also on disaster, right? HUD for housing, and other agencies that are all part of that entire disaster response. So when you think about customer experience, and I mentioned earlier about, somebody having an experience with the federal government, positive or negative, it's going to be about the federal government. It may not be about FEMA or HUD or SBA or pick your agency. It's going to be, my experience was great. They got me what I needed, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe not so much. So when you look at it from a government-wide perspective, you also have to keep that in mind, that interaction between agency to agency. I just use the disaster assistance one because that's, most people know about that, right? They know about FEMA and they know about the interactions because of the boots on the ground. So that's a very visible one. But again, that intersection where there's a handoff from one agency to another, and that customer experience needs to be the same across all the agencies. And maybe it's transparent to the user, but it needs to be a really good customer experience.
Yes, well said. Well said. And a shameless plug for vTech. We actually helped FEMA rebuild their disaster recovery. We modernized their disaster recovery application. So yes, wonderful. Okay, question 7, Maria, this one's going to lead with you. What strategies are being discussed or implemented to enhance customer experience in the federal technology?
Yeah, there's actually a handful of those that are really, when you talk strategic, focus areas of, and we've been talking about customer feedback, right? And it's not feedback for feedback's sake, but how do you operationalize that feedback from multiple channels, right, to improve the service at the customer level? So you're going to have feedback coming from many different places, those high impact service providers for veterans, students, families, farmers, taxpayers, whoever it might be. So you have to be able to operationalize that. We've talked a lot about the online access and streamlining. And I'm going to foot stomp a little bit the accessibility and making sure we're inclusive. We talked about it at the top of this webinar, when I gave the example of my mom and being able to reach people who have needs, right? So that accessibility of services is really, really important. And then, I also think making sure the services are efficient and time saving, right? What are those measures that remove, get rid of that administrative burden to save people time, increase the efficiency? Are there things that are auto populated so you don't have to enter them in 6 times? Do I have an account that's got my mailing address so I don't have to keep entering it in over and over again? So there's a number of themes just across the board, from efficiency, time saving, that personalization. My address is already in there. Why do I have to do it again? And just continuing to improve that and leveraging technology to really enable that customer experience. There are so many ways to do it, to simplify, streamline, and just
Yes,
enhance the services across the board.
that's right. Okay, I'll move forward just because I'm respecting the time here. Chris, I'm gonna jump to the next question, and this one's gonna be with you, sir. How can you make sure that federal employees are involved in delivering a great customer experience? That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it throughout, right? It's having the end game and the customer in mind. Why is someone going to be, interacting with us through this channel, right? What would I like if it were me, right? And it's the old golden rule: treat folks how you want to be treated. But again, it's also that um, most of what we deliver today in the United States is government, industry, and sometimes academics coming together to solve a challenge. CX and DX has moved forward through a multidisciplinary, set of folks: marketing, digital experience people, forms people, process people, industry, academic, and government employees. So I think those individuals in the government that figure out that it's a team sport, and why you're putting points on the board again is for that outcome for the citizen, are going to be successful in how they're doing it, and they're going to continue to try and improve over time, as Maria was just talking about. Right? It's not a do once and you're done, you win an award, and you go home, right? There's a great internal facing application at the Department of, I'll use the Department of Agriculture. We certainly had them at AT&T as well, but I will never forget, but one of the best kind of learning tools in the government. It's a online education system where there's customized training, there's stuff from college. It's their learning system, award winning. Great people jumping in there, getting advanced degrees, learning IT skills, learning marketing and finance skills, you name it. But we would get customer feedback that people hated the training. People started conflating the training with the digital experience, and that's what they hated was the mandatory training that really wasn't done real well in house. And I'll never forget traveling with the Secretary of Agriculture, and because everywhere I went in agriculture, I'd go and ask, if there was a customer sitting there, the customer or the workers were my customers too. All the different employees in mostly county agencies, you'd see the farm services, rural development, natural resource and conservation. They're out in every county. There's like 3,000 offices, and no matter where I go. So I was with the secretary one time, and he said, "Chris, why do people hate this? This digital experience with the training system?" And I had to tell them, "Well, they don't hate it. Actually, it's like award winning, and they love it. What they don't like is the mandatory training that we do." And there, I don't want to unpack that here. Some of it wasn't done real well. Some of it just wasn't fun training, and it's mandatory training. So it's the stuff you had to do, but we worked on that. Right. And so, I think that's where the back to the employee who owns this, the SES, the managers, the worker that owns the work unit, down to the individual that has to use the system, or internally or externally is serving our customers. They got to really think about it end to end and be in charge of it, but they need to bring a whole team to the fight to win. So I'd say that's how you put the federal government in the middle of being successful here. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to add a little different take on this and say, how can you make sure, all the federal employees I've ever worked with over my career, they are inherently about serving the taxpayer and about the public,
Sure.
right? It's about public service. And sometimes, like the example I gave, right? Once I got in touch with somebody, I had great experience, right? But it was getting to that point and talking to the person or the emails that were going back and forth. I had a great customer experience once I got to a point. So, I think sometimes it's not always just making sure that they're involved, but that they want to do it. And sometimes the mechanism of getting to it is sometimes a little hard.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Maria. All right, I'm
That
going to
was
jump.
good because I was taking the question in a completely different direction for you. So I think we hit two sides of the same coin.
Yep.
That was good. Yeah.
Yes, your answer was good, very good as well, Mr. Smith. Okay,
I'm not looking at. What are you trying to say, Mike? I'm comfortable in my own. I'm comfortable in my own skin. No, I'm kidding. I think it was no, I think it was I liked where Maria took it, right? Which is
Yeah.
that federal engaged in the actual customer, right? Which is,
Yep.
to be honest, a lot of times the federal employee is not. That's one of the things I noticed from a state and local to a federal. A lot of our federal employees never see the customer. So I like where Maria went with it.
Well
Yep.
said.
Little different breed.
That was good.
Yeah, very good. All right, next question. Maria, I'm going to start with you on this one. When selecting a partner to help update or create a net new customer experience for their organization, what factors should a federal government agency consider?
It's about the people and it's about the engagement, right? There's a project I was looking at recently, and it's about making sure the business is getting what they need, right? So when I'm selecting a partner, are they just looking at the technology, or are they really taking into the perspective of the mission, the business, the needs of the customer, all of those things? So that's a big factor. Not that we're going to bring in technology and we're going to do a thing, but you have to have that engagement across the board, not just from your customers, but also from the key stakeholders within the agency, within the business, that really understand the nature of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So that it has to be, I want to say personal, but I think there has to be a personal touch there that makes sure that it's just not techie and you're just not throwing something out. And that there's also follow through, so that even as you're rolling out new technology, you're educating the users across the board and making it seamless and easy for them, whether your customers are internal, your business partners, or they're external customer facing. So you have to take all of those factors into account when you're selecting um, a partner, right, to help with this, that they really get it. Then it's not just about the technology.
Well said. Mr. Smith, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think Maria nailed it with the caring and being a subject matter expert in the business you're about, the mission you're delivering, the service you're delivering, takes you the next mile, because the technology is the technology. So it's that understanding. And again, I would add to that, right? It's having somebody I always enjoy the conversations with colleagues like you guys and vTech on companies that bring a multi-domain kind of understanding of the CX DX world, but then have that mission understanding, because you're going to get the best result. And then I always like to say, on whatever the project is, it doesn't have to be IT, DX, CX, or any other acronym, is when stuff goes wrong, how do we react as a team to resolve it? Because invariably something goes wrong, right? And
Yes.
So something's going to gum up and a customer's going to be left stranded somewhere. How do we react to that and take care of it? How do we proactively see that? So having the right tools and feedback loops in place, that the queue isn't overflowing and it's popping over and saying, yeah, thanks for your call, you're first in line, and hangs up on you, or you're eighth in line. And that's not good. So definitely, I think that the team, putting the right team on the field here, that has the mission first and always, but then has the expertise to deliver successfully with low risk.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, this is the final question of the day, and Maria, we'll start with you here. Considering the rapidly evolving landscape of technology and the customer expectations, how do you envision the future of digital customer experience in the federal sector, and what key strategies should be considered?
You know, I I need to say this again. Don't forget about people that are not online, on computers, on mobile apps, those kind of things. And I'm going to pick on my mom again. She was on the phone with someone a month or so ago, and they were telling her, "Oh, well, just go online." This was a commercial company, and just go online and do X, Y, and Z. And she said, "But now, mind you, my mom's pretty computer savvy, but for what needed to be done, she was like, I'm not having any part of this." So she told the woman, look, I can't do this on my computer. And the woman that she was on the phone with immediately switched tactics, immediately switched from just go online and do a thing to walking her through everything. Now, you have to be able to do that and be flexible enough and be intuitive enough to pick up on that. So I think that's a key strategy in just making sure that you're encompassing the whole user, not just somebody who's online only.
Right. Uh, Chris, any thoughts there?
Well, it can get creepy, but one of the things that the financial industry was trying to do was kind of be proactive in life events as people go through their life, right? And so when you graduate from college, you may be wanting to get your first credit card and buy a car. And then, if you get married, then you might be buying a house. And so what was happening over the last few years is trying to predict what the next kind of life event was for an individual. And so if there's, an agency that has a kind of a lifetime, check-in like the IRS and Social Security, we name a couple, if you're into small business or farming, there's different agencies that are going to touch you through your life. So, but I think we have to be careful because, there is the aspect of Big Brother and people freaking out when government, is trying to help them when they're not looking for the help. But I do think ultimately the CX and DX are going to move towards a more proactive understanding of you when you come into the into the exchange and take whatever event you're going to do digitally and be able to again frictionless ease of movement, fill your stuff out for you because they knew you were here last year and you're coming back in to do something and keeping that data and saying, oh, you probably want to go do X, Y, and Z, hey, Mr. Smith at the SSA, and they are doing some of that, right? Are you here to apply for, and I'm not quite there, but those types of things I think are going to continue. I think government's going to have to watch that closely to make sure that we don't get into something that does get, to a place where it makes people uncomfortable because we don't want to break the trust anymore, than it already is in the nation, and not on government workers. That's never the issue. But when you look at trust of government and those polls, it's been low, and it's been low for a long time. And again, that's not the public servants; it's more our politicians. But the other thing I would add is that with machine learning and artificial intelligence moving along at the speed that they are, each agency should be looking at that, and there's the guidance from the president's office around this, not just for government, but broadly. How do we take advantage of that? Because I still think that one of the frontiers, and I talked about this, that we don't do as well on is being able to get the information you want from government more easily. There's a lot of open data and a lot of data sets, but navigating the plethora of agencies and departments and trying to find the information you're looking for still is not as easy as it should be. So I think there's opportunity there to tap into some of the large language models that are out there, and perhaps models that are built around government information that allow for meaningful AI impact pretty quickly for our citizens.
Yes, no, absolutely. And yes, and I think as we move forward, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. AI will become more of a play in that. And a lot of that would be pushed from the commercial market into the federal space. But well, Maria and Chris, I just want to thank you both. What a wonderful conversation. I know we're a little bit over the time limit here, and I appreciate everybody sticking around. We really want to get that last question in also. But Maria, I want to thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time. Chris, I want to thank you as well. Thank you so much for your time. What a wonderful conversation. And we look forward to the next webinar. And if there is any Q&A, I don't see any at the moment, but please ask your questions. We can get them answered by Chris and Maria offline. And we will see you at the next vTech webinar Federation.
Great. Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks
everybody.
Maria. Thanks, Mike and vTech. Great discussion.
Yep.